This is the second tutorial for MERIT, the Acre Project Image Portal. Project Acre is a global initiative run from the British Met Office focused on retrieving our global climate history. MERIT, an acronym for Meteorological Records Image Database, is a proof of concept for storing collections of images of historical weather records held by Acre project partners. MERIT has been designed by the citizen science team of the Australian Meteorological Association with software engineering by Dr. Tom Sizer. This tutorial covers navigating a complex collection of images and viewing metadata that accompanies an image. Most collections of weather records are consistently the same. Each image replicates the image previously, moving from one day or 1 week or one period to the next. But each page looks the same, recording temperature, pressure, barometric information, remarks, and so forth. But some image collections are more complex than that, and the South Australian regional folios are a very good example of it. The weather journals of the South Australian Regional Office of the Bureau of Meteorology detailed more than 100 years of weather for Australia and its proximate regions. The journals contain synoptic maps created at both the Adelaide and Melbourne offices, news text, rainfall maps, handwritten notations, and a number of other documents. 80 years have been imaged from this collection, totaling 85,000 images. The variety in the materials in the journals warrants a much more sophisticated navigation tool than we have seen so far. To have a look at some of the different images that exist for a single date, we'll search for an image, let's say 11th of July, 1896. So we choose 1896, July the 11th. Make sure we got closest ticked in case there isn't an Adelaide synoptic map. And we have the map in front of us. The first thing you'll notice is that we used to have just two chevrons to go forward and backwards one image. We now have a drop-down chevron as well. So if we're on the 11th of July, if we press the previous one, we'll go to the previous page, which is the synoptic map for the 10th of July. In this case, if we press forward, we'll go back to the 11th of July. But that isn't all that's available on the 11th of July. If we press forward again, we will end up on the 12th of July synoptic map. So it's keeping the theme of synoptic maps, and we'll go back to the 12th. But there is more on the 11th of July, back to the 11th of July, there's more on the 11th of July than just a synoptic map of 0900 for Adelaide. There's also a rainfall map, some handwritten material, and some newsprint. So we can look at newsprint for the 11th of July, and we find a fair amount of material here that has been clipped from newspapers and pasted up that's relevant to the 11th of July. We can also go back and have a look at the rainfall map. And it will bring up the rainfall map showing the daily rainfall, fairly crudely done with colored pencils, but showing the intensity of rain. Now, if we press forward, we don't go to the next synoptic chart, we go to the next rainfall map. So we jump from the 11th of July, in this case, to the 13th of August. And if we happen to look at this map, we'll notice that Kadina on York Peninsula obviously got a fair amount of rain. That's up in the 1 to 1.5 inch category, I believe. So they had a fairly wet period. The assumption here in the navigation is that if the user is on one theme, like a rainfall map or a synoptic chart or newsprint, they'll want to stay within that theme and will move from date to date as they choose the left or the right chevron. What we have seen is multiple types of images for the same date. We've seen news text, rainfall maps, synoptic maps, and so forth associated with one date. Sometimes there are actually multiple images of the same type of document for the same date. In an extreme case, is the Great Brisbane Flood of February 1893. So let's see if we can find it. 1893, February, and I believe it started on the 1st, and we want to find newsprint. So it displays the first page of newsprint, and when we go to see what is also available on this day, there is a synoptic map. There are 5 pages of handwritten script, and there are 13 pages of newsprint. It wasn't called the Great Brisbane Flood for no reason. Let's have a look at the second page. And we end up with some pretty densely packed, pasted up newsprint. And we have a little gizmo that we can use to help us look around this, and that's the magnifier. If we use the magnifier, we can look at things that look interesting. Oh, I see several deaths, right? Flood 9 feet, previous record. Oh, that might be interesting. So let's have a look at it then. The flood reaches heights level on Sunday when it was 9 foot 6 inches above the flood mark of 1890. 1890. So 3 years later, these poor people had another major flood in 1893. Again, no wonder it's called the Great Flood of Brisbane. So if we click out of here, the magnifier is still active. So we go back to the menu and click the magnifier so that it is no longer active. Another example of multiples of one image type comes later in the collection. So let's move forward in the collection now, and we'll look at going near the end of the imaged part of the collection. We'll go up to 1954 and look at the 14th of September. And in this case, we want to look for the Adelaide synoptic map. Now, if we access the chevrons, there's only one type of image, and that's synoptic map. But there are 7 synoptic maps per day, so we are now dealing with intraday synoptic maps. So we're on the 0300 map. We can move to the 0600 map, or we can use the chevrons to take us through. So let's say we're interested in looking at the weather details for Hobart. So on 0600, we'll click through and access the 0900 map, and click again. We can move in 3-hour periods through the Hobart details, and you'll notice that the following image always stays in exactly the place that the lead image was when we said that we wanted to expand on Tasmania. Now we'll go back to the 0900s. What we might want to do is, instead of going through Hobart in 3-hourly periods, we might actually want to look at the Hobart 0900 map in succession. So we can change the navigation system by accessing preferences off the menu or by pressing P. And under the navigation tab, we can say that we would like to have 2 different navigation buttons. One is to go through images, image by image. I want multiple buttons because I also want to use the date button as well. So now if you look, we have 2 different ways of moving through documents. One that will take us to the same image but on the next day, and that is the 0900 image for the 15th, or we can progress to the 1200 image for the same date, and those we look at the next image in the collection rather than the same image for the next day. So in this case, we're on the 0900 for the 14th of September, and we go to 0900 for the 15th of September, and of course 0900 for the 16th of September, and so forth. This is an interesting map because it just shows the extent of recording that was going on with the weather system in Australia at the time. This map ranges from Campbell and Macquarie Islands in the south to Lorengau on Manus Island in the north. And indeed, and we'll use the magnifier here, ships coming in from the Pacific Ocean were sending in data, as were ships in the Bight. So if we look in the Bight, we have the Dunedin Star, the Nerva, and the Clan MacDonald. This map contains an incredible amount of detail, and I'd hate to think what effort it took to record this on not only a daily basis, but on a 3-hourly basis, 7 times a day. There must be tens of millions of data items in this collection from the 1940s and 1950s alone. This map is calculated to cover 15% of the world's surface. One last thing we can look at is the metadata this image contains. And in this case, the notable things are that we have a 2-digit collection code, in this case WF for weather folios, and we have a creator ID, AM, for the Australian Meteorological Association. There is also contact and copyright information, geographical indicators such as the country and country code, and most importantly, the source of the collection, which is the National Archives of Australia, collection CRS D 1384. Metadata is written into the images at the time it is downloaded. So all of this metadata gets written into the image if anybody downloads an image or downloads a collection of images. And indeed, the user can put in their own comment. For instance, they may want to say, note the wind speed of Dunedin in this image. Before we leave this collection, we might note its historical importance because this is the first publication of synoptic charts for the Second World War for this period. During the Second World War, in 1942, specifically on May the 4th, a very important battle was fought in the Coral Sea. It was considered to be the turning point of the war. And if we look at the 900 map for this period, it was specifically in this area that the battle was fought. And we can note that the weather looks like it was quite mild at the time, because we can progress from the 4th of May to the 5th of May, and we can see that the isobaric lines are quite far apart. And indeed, it was notable that there were no heavy seas during the battle. And indeed, the really bad days were on the 7th of May and on the 8th of May. So that ends this tutorial, and there are further tutorials in which we'll be covering some other elements associated with navigating through the meteorological records image database known as Acre Merit.